Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Benji-Sales live chat. It's so good to be back. It's so good to see everybody. How are you doing today? We should be live. We should be rocking. We should be going. It's great to see you all. Sorry for the short notice on the stream today. I was not expecting to go live at all. And then today ended up being a super giant heavy news day. So I figured, hey, I've got time. I wasn't going to go live, but let's do it. Let's talk about some really big video game industry news. So like I said, sorry for the really short notice. I usually like to try and give like at least an hour before I go live. And today it was like 30 minutes. So, we'll see how much the chat fills up today or not. The topics are big, but short notice wasn't planned. So we'll see how it goes. What are we going to talk about today? What are these big topics that I'm hyping up? Obviously, if you follow me on Twitter or if you even saw my thumbnail, you can see that there's some pretty huge stuff going down today, particularly with CD Projekt Red, but also with PlayStation and Hermen Hulst. Now, really quick before we get into your comments and questions, I'm going to break down what exactly CD Projekt announced today because it is pretty crazy. It's a very ambitious lineup, and there's a lot of discussion online about whether this is like actually achievable, if they're overestimating themselves, if it's going to work. I have some thoughts on it. I've gone over it on Twitter, but I'm sure we're going to go into it here as well. So what all do they have coming? Well, it's a lot. And I want to make one thing really clear here, too, off the top. To be clear, this is their long-term strategy. So don't think about all of these projects as dropping within like the next 3 years, right? Some of this is going to be very far away. This was like a long-term strategy announcement, which I really like. I really like when these publishers are super transparent and open about what they're doing in the future. So I liked this. But what is that? What is this ambitious lineup that we keep talking about? Well, first and foremost, the first thing that's going to be hitting, Phantom Liberty expansion. We all know that. It's coming out next year. We found out that it's in the final stages of production. They have over 350 people on this, so a pretty good chunk for an expansion. And that's going to be due next year. Still no date, but considering it's in the final stages of production and the staff size, I'm thinking this is probably in the first half of the year, but don't quote that, right? It could be towards the end of the year. It feels to me like Phantom Liberty is probably going to be launching in the first half of next year sometime, maybe summer or something. Then they announced, we already knew that there was a new Witcher game in development. They announced that a little bit back, but now we know not only is it one Witcher game, they're planning an entire trilogy of games. That's right, that not just one, and we're going to see how it goes. They've got a whole trilogy planned. Now, the thing that caused a ton of discussion about this online was their comments that the plan is to release these 3 games in a 6-year window. And this caused a ton of controversy online because everyone was like, how are you going to develop 3 games in 6 years? And I know the wording is super confusing for people unless you really dive into it. But to be clear, they're not planning on developing 3 games in 6 years because that would be impossible. There's no way you're going to get 3 Witcher-sized games in 6 years. That's not going to happen. Their goal is actually to only develop 2 games in 6 years. Still ambitious, but much more doable. That's 3 years per game. So to be clear, the first game, the development cycle for the first game, the whole pre-production, everything that they've got to do to lay the groundwork for this trilogy, none of that is factored into that 6-year window. The 6 years is only for the second and third game. Now, it sounds confusing because you hear 3 games in 6 years, but they're saying within 6 years of the first game launching. So that 6-year, day 1 does not start until the first day that the first game's on shelves, right? It's 6 years after that. Suddenly, that sounds a lot more doable. Now, to be clear, I'm not telling you that they're going to get both these games out in 6 years. They very well could miss. But once you think about it like that, you're like, okay, that does sound a lot more doable. You're basically saying that you want to get a game developed 3 years per game. That's not that crazy. We've seen a lot of studios get a game out in 3 years, right? So again, be cautious. Don't instantly assume, oh, they're definitely going to hit this. But it's a lot less crazy than it first sounds when you hear that 3 games in 6 years. You're like, what? Because even when I first heard it, I was like, they think they're going to put out a new Witcher game every 2 years? But then you dive into it and you're like, no, it's 3 years per game. And then you're like, okay, now it starts to make a little bit more sense, the strategy there. So that's what the plan is, just to help kind of clear that up. That doesn't mean they're going to hit it, but it's not as impossible as it first sounds. The other big things we found out is that the Molasses Flood, which is another studio that I believe they own, I believe they acquired them, they're working on something that's called Project Sirius. That is a Witcher spinoff. This has nothing to do with that trilogy of games. It's not anything to do with that. It's some sort of spin-off title. Sounds like it's a lot smaller. It's still a big game, but right now they have, I think they said 60 staff on this. This is just going to be some sort of spin-off project. Probably going to be, maybe something pretty cool, but it's not like the main trilogy made by CD Projekt Red. This is some sort of spin-off title. Then they announced two big things that are grabbing a ton of headlines besides Witcher. That's right, Project Orion, which is the sequel to Cyberpunk 2077. I had covered on Twitter the comments that the CEO, I believe, had noted a while back, and I had said, hey, this sounds to me like they're hinting that a Cyberpunk sequel is already being planned, right? I had said that, I think, like a month or two ago whenever I was reading his comments. He didn't outright say, hey, we're working on the next game, but he had said things like, we're fully invested in this IP. Right now, the plan is one major expansion for this first Cyberpunk game, and I was like, that sure sounds like you're getting ready for a Cyberpunk sequel. Well, it's now official. Project Orion is the name of this game. I think this is probably a pretty good ways away because Phantom Liberty's not even out yet. And they said that this is basically an early pre-production. So don't expect to see Project Orion, I would say, for probably at least 4 years. Don't expect that anytime soon. And another thing to be very clear about is that now CD Projekt Red, starting this year, they have changed how they run their company. So the Witcher team and the Cyberpunk team are completely separate. They're two separate teams. Because that's another thing I had some people asking me. How are they going to make these Witcher games, and how are they also going to make a Cyberpunk game? And that does sound pretty crazy. And again, this whole pipeline is ambitious. So like I said, don't instantly assume you're going to get all these games when they said. But to be clear, Project Orion was given no release window, just that a Cyberpunk sequel is coming. And also, like I said, they're two different teams now. So whatever Cyberpunk team's working on, they're not also working on Witcher, and Witcher people aren't also working on Cyberpunk. I'm sure, if you ask for a transfer or something, they might be willing to move some people around. But in essence, they're trying to run these as two separate teams. This team's making Cyberpunk games, this team's making Witcher games, and they're separated, right? Just like we see with other major publishers, right? There's people that work at Ubisoft. There's people that make Assassin's Creed games, and then there's people that make Rainbow Six games, right? They're completely different teams. That's basically what they're trying to start doing at CD Projekt Red, and so they can get more games out, have more stuff in development. They're basically trying to make themselves, they're a studio, but they're also trying to make themselves almost like a bigger publisher, right? They're not publishing other people's stuff, but they're trying to run their studio kind of like they are a big publisher. You get what I'm getting at? So Orion's going to be coming. Don't expect that in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think. I think that's probably a good 4 years away at least, considering the main Cyberpunk team right now is all on Phantom Liberty, and then they're going to move over to the next game. But it's cool to at least know it's coming, because we've seen Cyberpunk 2077 have that big resurgence lately. And then the last big thing that they announced was called Project Hadar, or Hadar. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it. And this is a new IP. That's right. Cyberpunk is something that they licensed. They're making the games for it, but they did not create Cyberpunk. Same thing with Witcher. This game is. This is an IP that they are making themselves. They're going to own. And again, this is another one of those projects that's very far away. My hunch, out of all of these projects that were announced today, this is the farthest off. This is a very small team. In fact, they describe it as let me find the wording here. They announce it as a small strike team. So this is really small, guys. This is super early. This is as pre-production as pre-production gets. Don't expect to see this new IP for many years, right? Maybe it comes out this gen, I don't know. But of any of these projects, this is the very furthest away, besides maybe some of the Witcher sequels, but out of like the first entries, right? If we're talking about that Flame and Flood Witcher game, if we're talking about the first Witcher Trilogy game, if we're talking about the Cyberpunk sequel, my hunch is that this is the farthest of all of them away because it's just an incubation phase. It's a small strike team. It's something that they're just now really developing. So you're not going to see this for many years, but still cool to know that CD Projekt has a new IP coming. So that's kind of like the big overarching CD Projekt Red news there. You guys can ask me anything you want about it. We're going to break that all down to some other topics we can talk about as we found out that Sony is going to be shipping apparently 2 million PlayStation VR 2 systems by March 2023. Now, this is impressive because that means that they're planning on this way outpacing PlayStation VR 1. We can talk about what that might mean for pricing. Are they actually going to hit those? What it might mean for release timing. You guys can ask me anything about that you want to. Hermen Hulst has given a bunch of new interviews that came out. I think the big headline that caught people was his comments about PC and their strategy there. You guys can ask me about that. And you guys can ask me about anything you want. Dead Space Remake got a trailer, a ton of stuff. So if this is your first time ever as part of my live chat, the way this works, it's a stream, it's a show, it's 100% driven by you, your comments, your questions. You just drop them down into chat and we break down the latest news in the video game industry. There's going to be two ways to do that. First of all, of course, there's the free method. You just type a question, pops into chat, and I get to as many free questions as I possibly can. If you want to guarantee that I get to your question, the way to do that is going to be the super chat option. Type a super chat, whatever you want. It alerts me immediately, and I get to super chats as soon as they drop. Don't feel pressured or obligated to donate in super chat, just a way to help support me and the channel and guarantee that I get to your question, because often with these chats, I can't unfortunately hit every free question because it usually fills up too much. So start dropping questions now. If you're in the chat and you want me to be able to get to your question, now is the time to do it, especially if it's a free one, because they usually fill fast. All right, let's get rocking. We got a couple super chats here off of the top. We got Timmer72299 with a 2 super chat. Thank you so much, Timmer. Always so supportive and always with the kind comments saying, hope you're doing well, Benji. Love your vids/tweets. Well, Timmer, I appreciate it. I love everything that you do too, buddy. I'm doing so much better now that my long COVID's over. Like, I'm fully back now, back to lifting weights, feeling great, feeling healthy. So I'm happy to be back. You know, you don't appreciate your health until you're unhealthy for a while. And then all of a sudden it reminds you, like, it's really fortunate for those of us that get to be healthy. So thank you, Timmer. Anthony Johnson here with a 5. Fall is here. A ton of games are coming, but the world economy is very unsettled. This is a great question, Anthony. Do you think game spending will rise or fall compared to last year? Man, Anthony, what a great question. Okay. So I'm expecting both Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 this holiday to be up year over year in hardware sales. So I think you're going to get a nice boost and uplift from those in hardware revenue because they are such expensive consoles, right? Particularly Series X and PlayStation 5. They're both $500, right? They're really expensive. So I have a feeling that hardware, because I'm expecting Switch to be down year over year, to be honest, but I'm not expecting it to be massively down. You know, kind of like what we've seen all year. Switch is down, but it's not like, you know, getting super blown away by last year or anything. It's just like what I've been talking about on this channel for many, many months. It's just that slow decline, right? Just a real slow slope. I'm guessing Switch is down year over year, but not by a huge amount. The one thing that could throw a wrench in that is if Nintendo does a price drop. You know, they never price drop Switch. Like, literally, it's still $299. The one thing that could potentially, in terms of units, have them up year over year, maybe Nintendo surprises us and does a price drop. I'm going to assume they don't because it's Nintendo and they just haven't price dropped like any Switch. So assuming it keeps its price point, I'm guessing Switch is slightly down year over year. Nothing crazy, but slightly. And then Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 up year over year. So overall, I'm guessing that revenue for hardware sees growth because I think the growth in the other consoles will offset the slight decline in Switch. Now, for software, this is a big question because this holiday's lineup is not that impressive in terms of like giant commercial sellers. there are some good ones. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is going to be a behemoth. We saw that had the biggest beta in history for Call of Duty. So expect that to be an absolute monster. Expect Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to be just complete and utter juggernauts. God of War Ragnarok is going to be huge. So we do have some really huge hitters in there, but we also had a ton of delays, as we know, right? Stuff like Hogwarts Legacy got moved out of this window, and a ton of games, right? And I'm still not even sure if Callisto makes this year. Not that I'm expecting Callisto to be like the biggest game in the world, but still another AAA title. So who even knows? That could get delayed too. So software, I would say, is the bigger question. I think a lot of what depends on if software's up year over year or not really comes down to Call of Duty, because Vanguard disappointed last year. So if Modern Warfare 2 is as big as I think it's probably gonna be, and it completely annihilates what Vanguard did, you could, even with a somewhat not super impressive holiday window, still see potentially software up year over year, because like I said, Vanguard really disappointed, and Call of Duty's big enough on its own that could really change the landscape if it just crushes what Vanguard did. And Pokemon's going to be huge in God of War. So I would say that's the more wild card between the two is software, because I'm pretty darn confident hardware is going to be up. I know the economy is pretty sketchy, but I think that people still want these new systems enough that things will probably shake out okay. That's kind of my thoughts on it, but we'll have to see. Tim Chimney here with a 2 super chat. I love whenever I see these. First time watching live. Love the content, Benji. Well, I love it whenever we get people in here for the first time. We have a super hardcore community here that's here for almost every chat, which I love, right? I love seeing your guys' names. I feel like we're all, there's that whole thing where people talk about, what is it, like parasocial relationships or whatever, where, yes, I don't know you guys personally, but for the people that are here often, I feel like I kind of know your guys' personality and stuff, right? Like, we're in chats every single week with each other. I talk to a lot of you guys more than I talk to people in real life. So I really appreciate it, Tim Chimney. It's always super cool when we see some new people in here too, getting introduced to the community, and I love doing these chats. I hope you have fun today. We do one every week. All right, so super chats are now clear. Let's get rocking on your free questions, guys. All right, Joseki here. Hello, Benji. First, and great to see you, Joseki. Hello, Benji. First rapid question. How many of the CD Projekt Red projects do you think will release before the current generation's over? Wow, great question. I have a feeling at least half of them will be next or cross-gen. Yeah, this is a really good question. So, okay, out of the projects they announced, I definitely think that first game in the Witcher trilogy is this gen. I think it's probably pretty likely that the Cyberpunk sequel is also this gen, but these games are going to be pretty late, right? Because Cyberpunk 2077 came out, basically right when this generation was starting. So I think they'll have the sequel out, but it's going to be towards the end of the generation. And same for Witcher. We know that, that's been in development now for basically a year, whenever you count like pre-production work and stuff. So I think they'll get those two out this gen. Those Witcher sequels, probably next gen. Or maybe, I put it this way, best case scenario I would say is that the second Witcher game is cross-gen. Because, this is a total guess. I'm guessing that the next Witcher game's goal is to be out probably in 2024. So if you add 3 years on that puts you at 2027. At that point, these consoles will be 7 years old. So you're probably looking at the next generation there or cross-gen. So I put it this way, the third Witcher game's definitely not going to be this gen. That's definitely next gen. Second game, potential to be cross-gen, but that it just depends on timing of the first one. Maybe that even slips. The first Witcher game for sure will be this gen, and I'm pretty darn confident that the Cyberpunk sequel will be as well. Those are the two that I'm pretty confident in. That Witcher spinoff, who knows? That game, we don't really know much of anything about it, so we don't know the scope or anything, so that's hard to say. That new IP is probably next gen, or at best case scenario cross gen, considering it's just now with a small strike team in incubation. So like you said, Joseki, yeah, at least half are probably, next gen or cross gen. The only ones I'd feel super confident about getting this generation are that first Witcher game and the Cyberpunk sequel. SD, Hermen Hulst, pretty clear, and like you said many times, games as a service games day one on PC and console, single player games at least 1 year of wait to go to PC. What do you think of that? And today, Hermen's lots of interviews. Well, thank you, SD, for noting that. I've been saying that ever since people asked me about that, right? That's been like a hot button question people have had for me since the day that PlayStation and Sony announced we're going to start doing PC. Of course, the next logical question is, when is day and date? And the thing I've always told people is, I said, I really think they're probably going to do multiplayer and games as a service day one on PC, and they're probably not going to do it for single player this generation. That's been my prediction, and it really looks like Hermen agrees with me. I don't always get all the predictions right, of course. Nobody can. If I could predict everything right, I'd be a billionaire. But the one thing, SD, I do feel like I'm pretty good at is reading these companies' strategies, right? There's some people that are way better at math than me. There's some people that are way better at crunching numbers than me. The thing I've always kind of prided myself on that I'm usually pretty good at predicting is strategy. And it looks like, boom, right on. I was right on this one, which does not surprise me. Like I always said, Sony still wants to pull people into buying PlayStation 5s. Those people that really want these big Sony single-player games day one. So they give that year delay. If you really don't care about day one, it's still somewhat new enough a year later that on PC it doesn't feel like you're waiting an eternity to get it. They might even be able to get double dips by waiting a year from people. And then those multiplayer games, you want as big of a player base as possible on that early on, because the main way these games make money, these big multiplayer games, it's not their day one sales, right? It's not about going out and, even if it's not free to play, right? If you're like a boxed game, it's not really that $60 purchase someone makes off the bat like it is for a single player game. The way these multiplayer games are earning all of their money are through things like microtransactions or map packs or DLC or whatever the monetization strategy is. The way you're making money on these is, after the fact, after launch. It's all of that, revenue you're making later. And for something like multiplayer, you want it to be alive and thriving so that people are buying into this, right? So the way you want to do that is get as many people playing as possible. So of course you're going to want PC alongside the console for that. So I'm not surprised at all to see Hermen announce this. It lines up exactly with what I've been predicting. And I think it's a pretty fair trade, right? I don't know if they'll go day one on single player content eventually. It very well could happen. But I've always been telling people I really don't see it this gen at least. I think this generation, at least they keep that year window. Thank you so much for the question, SD. And it's good to have clarification. I'm really glad Hermen came out and said that. Now we know, right? We know their plans. There was before a lot of guesswork, like when's something going to come? How are they going to do this? Now we have a pretty clear answer, so I really appreciate that. All right, I think we had 2 super chats drop. Let me hit those super chats. Highlander001 with a 10. Thank you so much, Highlander. Great to see you. Always so supportive in every chat. With the CMA putting out a timeline with a provisional finding in January with possible remedies and final report in March, does this put the FTC in a box on their final report? This is super interesting. That website that Microsoft put out is real interesting, guys. And I know a lot of people that look at this stuff like I do that are saying similar things. Microsoft making that website a little weird. If you missed it, Microsoft has made a website for the Activision Blizzard acquisition where they're fully explaining everything, links to everything, lots of explanations about everything. And the thing that me and a lot of these other people that watch this stuff are thinking is, why would you do that this late in the process if you were 1,000,000% confident that this is going through? It does feel very weird timing-wise and very strange if you had full confidence that this didn't happen from the beginning, right? They didn't have this website ready to go as soon as they announced it. This is late to be putting this out there. I've always been very confident this acquisition is going to go through, but I'm going to be honest, this thing makes me a little bit more like, huh. I suspect, and I know there was a Microsoft spokesperson that came out just recently, and they said everything's going as smooth as we expected in Europe. Spokespeople are going to always say that. I am not 1,000% sure that things in Europe are going as smooth as they planned. I think the FTC, you're answering this about the FTC. My total guess here, again, I could be 1,000% wrong on all of this. I have zero inside information on this. Nobody does, to be honest with you. This is all handled in court, and if you were leaking stuff from this sort of thing, that'd be like literally illegal, right? These are like private documents and private investigations. You don't want to be putting that out there. So I have no clue, right? This is just from an outsider looking at the things that are being said publicly. It feels to me like Europe has really slowed this process down. It felt like things in the US and the FTC were starting to move pretty quickly earlier this year, and now it feels very bogged down. So I'm still of the opinion that this acquisition is going to happen, but I think it could struggle a bit, to be honest with you. I think they might be struggling to get this through the door all the way through, late next year. When I say late, I mean their fiscal year, not their calendar year. The goal was for this to be done by June. So it could come down to the wire. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe things are swimmingly, and it just pops through in February or March, right? There was a time I was feeling pretty optimistic about this, but it has changed my opinion on it. And we're going to have to watch Highlander. I don't know. Put it this way. I would not go with the assumption right now that this is going to be happening quick anymore. I would just assume that if it gets finalized, it's going to be probably like next summer. Could be wrong. I'm actually personally hopeful it goes through sooner. And I know that some PlayStation fans are not going to be happy that I say that, but I'm going to be honest. I think it's the best thing for Activision as a company if they get acquired, because I think that management and leadership there has done an incredibly poor job, and I feel like Microsoft will at least do a better job of running these companies and the decision-making within Activision Blizzard. And I think it helps the Game Pass and Microsoft ecosystem. So I'm personally in favor of this particular acquisition. I don't want to see a ton of more publishers get acquired. I've said that a lot. I don't want to start to see every publisher get acquired, but I am in favor of this one. So we'll have to see. Benji with a 5 super chat here. Thank you so much, Benji. Also great to see you in every single chat and always so supportive. Hi, Benji. Is Sony bringing too much Horizon content? This is a great question. In a short time. Forbidden West, Horizon PC, Horizon VR, Horizon Remaster, Horizon Multiplayer, Horizon TV show. Okay, so it's very clear Sony's all in on that Horizon brand. In regards to, let's break down each one, right? Because you're asking if there's too much. Forbidden West was earlier this year, so that's like the big Horizon game. Then you have Horizon VR, which is hitting early next year. I don't think they've publicly said this is a launch title for PlayStation VR 2, but I don't see how it's not. I feel like you can't launch VR 2 without this game because it's been like the main showpiece thing they've shown off. So assuming this is a launch title for VR 2, that's going to be early next year. So that's about a year apart, and they're not the exact same games, right? They're totally different experiences. Then you have the TV show and all of this stuff. I think that some of this is going to be more spread out than it sounds. We know of all these projects right now, but that doesn't mean they're all coming out next year. I suspect they're probably going to want to time the Horizon remaster alongside the show or fairly close to the show, and that's not a new game, it sounds like. Now, in regards to that whole Horizon situation, what I thought, this game does not need a remake. So whenever there were some people saying Horizon Zero Dawn remake is coming, I was like, I don't see how that's remotely needed. Like, that game still holds up great. Now, the remaster idea, I'm actually less opposed to this if you can get it and it's not $70 if you already own this game. That is my opinion on Horizon Remaster. If this comes out, and even if you already own Horizon Zero Dawn, it's $70 and that's how it is, I do not think this is going to do well. I'm just telling you that right now. I do not expect it to sell well at all, actually. Not at all. I think it will do very poorly. However, If it's something like you're going to get improved, character models and stuff, it's going to look a lot closer to Forbidden West, and you can upgrade for, let's just say, $20. Let's say you already own the game, you get a $20 upgrade. I think that might go decently well, right? I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be like lighting the charts on fire, but I think there's a lot of people that loved Zero Dawn that, hey, if it's 15 or $20 or whatever to get a cool upgrade, they would probably, a chunk of people do that. It's all, to me, this Horizon remaster, it's all going to come down to price model and release strategy. That's really what it's about. This cannot be $70. It can't be that's the only way to get it, because that will be a disaster. I just don't see who would really buy that, to be honest with you. But an upgrade, and then if you're a new buyer, right, let's say you didn't even own Horizon Zero Dawn in any way, shape, or form, it's like $50 for that, or a $20 upgrade. Okay, that's a situation I can kind of see. So it's going to really depend on pricing and release model. The Horizon multiplayer project is probably pretty far away. I suspect that's probably going to be like a Monster Hunter style game because it just makes sense. So it is a lot. It's a lot of Horizon content. Clearly, Sony really likes this IP, right? You don't pump out this much stuff unless you really believe in the IP. So it kind of does depend. It is a lot. If you're a Horizon fan, I will say you got a lot coming. But there's a few things that really depend on how it all shakes out. I think the multiplayer project could be really cool if it's like we all think it is a Monster Hunter game. If it's some sort of competitive thing, I don't see that doing well. But I also don't think that works with Horizon, and I don't think that they would think that works with Horizon. So I'm assuming it's going to be some sort of, the rumors say it's some sort of co-op thing. A co-op Monster Hunter style game would work really well. All right. Super chats are cleared again. Thank you so much, guys. Joseki. Also, are you buying God of War Ragnarok, or are you waiting for the remake in 3 years? Yeah, this is the problem, right? This is the risk Sony's running, is that all these remakes and remasters, it's a lot in a short window. I'm getting God of War Ragnarok day one, of course. If they're going to be full-on remaking projects, they need to be old projects that need, like, they definitely need a remake. I feel like The Last of Us skirted that line. I'm going to be honest, I played The Last of Us Part 1, and personally, I do think it was an amazing upgrade over the original. But the original is still a very solid game, and I totally get that Part 1 is not going to be a remake that works for everyone. You're probably still perfectly okay with that first game, right? That very original release. I will say, though, that was really a PS3 game, and even the remaster that they did on PS4 mostly just fixed resolution and frame rate. The core assets were still basically PS3 assets. That's one thing a lot of people forget. So, personally, having played both of them, the original and the Part 1 remake, it was a legit huge upgrade visually. Gameplay wise, not so much. Visually, it was legitimately ginormous, the upgrade. So if they're going to be remaking games, they really don't need to be remaking PS4 games, except for maybe Bloodborne, because the technology in Bloodborne's bad. Hate to break it to you, but Bloodborne's a bad performing game, has all kinds of frame pacing issues. If you're going to remake a PS4 game, the only one I think that needs to be remade is Bloodborne. Other than that, they should be aiming for PS3 or earlier. That's it, right? In my opinion. I don't think PS4 remakes are going to go over well. Bloodborne would be huge because, like I said, the core tech is bad. It just is. But other than that, yeah. SD. And the other question is the PS event, that Helldivers leak trailer, the Silent Hill leaks, and the recently registered Silent Hill trademark Final Fantasy 16 trailer in October confirmed by director. There has to be an event of PlayStation, right? Yes, I actually think there is now. The info of PSVR 2 production, etc., all lines up. Thoughts? I agree. I think you're going to get one in October. Again, I could be wrong because I thought there was going to be one in September. I never said it was inside information. That was just assuming, looking at what Sony had done the last couple years. I think there might have been an issue. This is a total guess. Assuming something does happen in October. For anyone that missed this, SD is right. There are a lot of things that kind of point towards a PlayStation showcase. Like they said, Helldivers had a leaked trailer, which we know is going to be a first-party game that Sony's making, right? I believe that the studio is not first-party, but it's a PlayStation Studios title because they're the publisher and everything. We know for a fact that the director of Final Fantasy 16 said there is a new Final Fantasy 16 trailer coming this month. We know we have to get PSVR 2 info very soon because they're launching it early in the year. People forget that 2 million ship number by March 2023. That doesn't mean it's launching March 2023. That's just their production goal. By March 2023, they want to ship 2 million units. That means they could launch in January. They could launch in February. That was never reported that that was the launch month. Just that was what they were shipping by, was 2 million by then. So this could be a January or February release. We really don't know, just early 2023. So they're going to need to give you that price. They're going to need to give you that launch lineup. There is a lot of stuff pointing for an October PlayStation event. I have no idea if it's going to happen or not. I will say it really looks like it, even more than September did. But we'll have to see. We will have to see. It's hard to say, SD, but if it does, let's just totally guess here and assume that you get a PlayStation Showcase in October. My thought would be probably they wanted September like they did the last couple of years, and maybe something wasn't ready. You know, maybe they just, something that's very, very important, whether that's the PlayStation VR price, whether it was the exact date, whether it was, you know, a major trailer for one of the biggest games they want to show there. That would be my guess, SD. Maybe, again, this is only assuming something happens in October. Maybe they wanted September, but something pushed it back a little bit, so they ended up having to go October. That's a total guess, though. How much leap forward? Thoughts on Horizon Zero Dawn Remaster? We kind of went into that. Is Sony being greedy with these unnecessary remasters / remakes? We don't have a lot of new IPs announced from them, so I'm worried about their creative freedom. How much, like I said before, it all depends on pricing, how much of an investment this thing is. If it's a small team doing this, and it's a, you know, fairly inexpensive upgrade for people that already own Horizon, I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. If it's something that's way bigger and more ambitious and it's $70 and you can't get it any other way, I agree, Hamish, that would be a mistake. They should not do something like that. So to me, it literally just completely depends on what the price and release strategy is. That it lives and dies by that, in my opinion. Outside of that, like I said, no more remakes, I don't think, for PlayStation 4 generation games. Maybe you do something like a director's cut for The Last of Us Part 2 if they want to do some new content for that. But that's about it. No more remakes. Bloodborne, I think, needs a full-on remake. Other than that, PS3 or earlier if you're going to do remakes. Randy Norman. Overwatch 2 launches in an hour, so what prediction about it will perform? Player count, Twitch views. Also seems like Compulsion's new IP most likely launches next fiscal. Guess a release date, and when will it be revealed to the public? So Overwatch 2 is an interesting cat in that I see some people being like there's no hype for Overwatch 2, but then I see tweets for Overwatch 2 going nuclearly huge for the Overwatch community. So here's my thoughts on Overwatch 2. I think it's going to be really big among people that like Overwatch. So if you're an Overwatch fan, people forget this all the time. They always talk about how Overwatch is a dead game, and it is a dead game in terms of content. But that game was still almost always in the top, even with the content drought, where they've had no maps, no heroes, nothing forever. That thing is still usually in the top 25 most played games on Xbox. Of every game that's on the Xbox ecosystem, it's usually in the top 25. And not only that, Xbox is definitely not its biggest platform. It's PC, right, by far. Overwatch was never a game that people just stopped caring about. The problem for Overwatch is they completely abandoned a multiplayer game to make a sequel that took way too long to make. So I suspect my hunch with Overwatch 2, people that are Overwatch fans, like me, you like Overwatch, you liked Overwatch 1. I think it's going to be huge with that community. Like, people within the Overwatch community have been so starved for new content. We are all unbelievably excited to get Overwatch 2. My hunch, though, is that Activision has done a very poor job of marketing and explaining to new players, people that don't care about Overwatch, that don't like Overwatch, why they should get into Overwatch 2. You know what I mean? So that's going to be the uphill climb for Overwatch 2, is how do they really break out outside of the actual Overwatch community? Because I have no doubt people that love Overwatch are going to be way into this game. Because if you're still playing Overwatch now, all these years after there's no content, you're already in, right? Someone like me, if you're still playing Overwatch, like, you have no reason to play Overwatch for the past 2 or 3 years unless you literally adore it, because there's been nothing new for the game. Those people, we're already sold. We're already all in on Overwatch 2. So the Overwatch community is going to be very excited for this. The problem is, how's it going to do beyond that? My hunch is long-term Overwatch 2 is actually going to do pretty good. Because the core game, there's nothing that plays like Overwatch. I know there's going to be people that mention things like Paladins and stuff or whatever. There's nothing that quite scratches the itch in the way that Overwatch does for that type of experience. It really is. Overwatch is kind of on its own island. If you like that, some people don't like the way Overwatch plays, but if you like it, there's nothing else quite like it. So I think it will do pretty well. I don't know that Overwatch 2 will ever be as big as Overwatch 1 was at its peak. I mean, people forget Overwatch 1 was a freaking juggernaut. 2016 to 2019, it was one of the biggest games on the planet. It was enormous. I don't know if it can ever reach those heights again. I hope it does. But I do think Overwatch 2 the next couple of years will be much more healthy than Overwatch 1 was its last few years. So, that's kind of my thoughts on that. In terms of compulsion, I don't know. I mean, I know what they're working on. Other people know what they're working on. Some of it leaked. So, I mean, I know exactly what compulsion's doing. When it's going to launch, though, I don't know. Randy, it's hard for me to guess on when it's going to launch. That's a great question. I got no idea. Release date, it could be next year, maybe, but I don't know. A lot of release dates are hard to guess right now because everything was so delayed by COVID and everything. So we'll have to see. That, it's hard for me to guess. When will it be revealed to the public? Next year, I'm guessing, if they don't do it at the Game Awards. Microsoft's going to definitely announce some big stuff at the Game Awards, in my opinion, or show some stuff. I don't know if they're going to show it there. If not, then sometime next year. I think there might have been a super chat. Let me make sure there wasn't, but there might have been. We have a bot. Let me block the bot. And whoops. Okay. Okay, I think the bot's gone. And there is a super chat from Highlander001, your second one. Thank you so much, Highlander. Sad news, and I'm going to totally annihilate this name, so I apologize. I know exactly what he looks like. Everyone does that follows CD Projekt, but I got no idea how to... Oh, no, wait, this isn't the CD Projekt. This is sad. This is incredibly sad. Sad news about Andril Korzinkin, I'm sure that's wrong, I apologize, was lost in action in Ukraine. This is heartbreaking. He's one of the lead animators on Metro Games. World lost a great talent in him. Yeah, this is incredibly sad. I don't know if you guys have seen this. War freaking sucks. It's crazy to me that it's still 2022 and humans are killing each other over land or anything, to be honest with you. It's heartbreaking what's going on in the world right now. If you guys have missed this, really sad. Yeah, one of the people, he worked on Metro. I saw some really kind comments from, I think, someone that worked with him, where they were talking about how Cory Barlog was a huge inspiration for this person. It's incredibly heartbreaking. Whenever I saw that, I was just like, I can't even believe it. Like, it's just so unnecessary, but it's really sad. It's really, really sad. I don't know if they're doing anything for his family. I don't know if there's any kind of GoFundMes or anything like that, but yeah, it's incredibly sad news. And thank you for that super chat, Highlander. All right. Justin Tanhill, what's your takeaway on Halo possibly switching to Unreal Engine? We talked about this on the last chat. There's a whole bunch of drama going on around this rumor, and I had told you guys on the last chat, from what I knew, and I say knew because it's not heard, from what I knew, some of this was not accurate, some of this reporting. Then Windows Central comes out, and they say, and I love Windows Central and I love Jez, so to be very clear, whenever we go into this, don't think there's any shots being taken at all, because something might have truly changed. But if it changed, it was super recently, and Jez actually confirmed that here. So I'm going to talk to you about what I said last chat, how I was positive what I was saying was true, and also how maybe things like literally just changed. So for anyone that missed it, there was a big report that went out, I think it was last week, saying that Halo was going to switch engines to Unreal Engine 5, that Tatanka, which is the Battle Royale, was going to be super delayed by like up to like 2 or 3 years, like Infinite was like essentially being soft canceled and they were already starting on the next game, and like a whole bunch of stuff. And I knew that some of this definitely, up to recently, was definitely not accurate. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Then Windows Central came out with a report yesterday, I believe, where they were saying that they never 100% committed to it. So I'm glad that they did that, because it might not be 100% true. They were talking about how the only part of the rumor they were talking about was the Unreal Engine shift. And Windows Central was saying that there was some evidence that they were seeing that they were possibly going to switch to Unreal Engine. They did not back up that that Halo Infinite's being soft canceled and only going to get a couple more seasons so they can make a new game. They did not say that. They did not say for sure that Tatanka was going to be like super delayed, but that it might be switching the engine. Then Jez came out today and said that he confirmed as recently as 3 months ago Tatanka was still on Slipspace, and also that he's not 100% sure it's actually switching to Unreal Engine. He even said today might be some wires getting crossed in the reporting. So what I will say, up until very recently, none of this was true, okay? Now, could some things have changed like in the last 3 weeks, because they did get that whole management shakeup at 343, Bonnie Ross leaving, all that sort of stuff? Could some things have changed like instantly? Like we're talking, this is like new news. It is possible. But if these sorts of things are happening, they literally just happened, which is not usually how leaks work. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Usually the stuff that leaks, it's stuff that's been in the pipeline for months and months and months. It's not something that's like something leaks a week after the decision gets made. Sometimes it can, but that's not usually how it works. So my comments are on this whole story. I do think long term, and I said this last chat, it might be best to switch to Unreal Engine, because I do believe the part of the report that Jez had said that there's all kinds of issues with Slipspace. I am inclined to believe that for various reasons. So I think switching to Unreal Engine might honestly be the smart call long term, right? Whatever the next Halo game gets made. I don't think you can do it for Halo Infinite. I don't think, again, unless something has crazy changed with the Tatanka, I don't think you can do it with that, because it's very far in development. And like Jez said, up until 3 months ago, at the very least, was still being developed within Slipspace. So I think maybe whatever the next game is on next generation, you maybe make that Unreal switch, but I don't know. I don't know if they can do it this gen. Long term, though, it might be the right call. We're going to have to see. These next few months are going to be very interesting to see if any of this is true or not. I will give a shout out to that leaker. I usually don't like leaks like this, but if that person was right, shout out to them, because they got a hot off the press leak. Like, as in they got that right after the decision was made. So that's going to be very interesting to see if that actually pans out. But those are kind of my thoughts on it. And don't assume that it's 100% real even after that Windows Central article yesterday, because like I said, Jez today said actually he's not 100% sure if it's actually switching. So there's some weird stuff going on with that rumor. I do believe, though, it's possible that long-term they do switch to Unreal Engine. I just don't know if the part of it's true that it's going to be on Infinite and Tatanka and all that kind of stuff like very soon. That I don't know about. Okay. Make sure there's no super chats. No, there is not. C Keyframes. Hey, Benji, with so many games being lost to time, why don't we see more ports? Aren't they usually guaranteed money? You're talking like ports of old games, right? Like super old games getting ported to modern hardware. It's a couple things, I think. Part of it is that some of the source code on these games got lost, which I know sounds kind of crazy. But back in the day, people were not as good about preserving old code as they are now. Back before there was things like digital platforms and stuff where, you could carry games over and just sell them digitally and things like that. Back when it was just like a boxed product only, you weren't downloading games. People were not quite as good on that. There's some notorious stories about Square Enix, for example, and other companies completely losing source code on games. And it's not ultra uncommon. This happened, I'm not going to say it's every game, but, back in the day, it was not as common to make sure you kept all that source code for everything. And some games got lost. I think Kingdom Hearts famously, I think when they made that Kingdom Hearts port, they had to like remake it basically in some areas. I think they had some code, but not all of it. So I think part of it could be that some of these old games, they just don't know where the source code is. So it's a little more work to get it out because you essentially have to remake it, or you have to, do some sort of emulation type stuff on it. So that could be part of it. Part of it is still resources. Even if it's a small amount of resources, you might desperately need those resources for something else, considering how long games make. The question is how much money is in some of these. Guaranteed money, I would say yes if it's an ultra cheap port job, like as in you got the source code, you're not doing that much to it, and you're just re-releasing it with maybe tiny enhancements. That pretty much guaranteed money. But if you're putting any sort of work in it, you never know. Some people really love older retro games, but there's a lot of people that just don't care. So it just depends, see keyframes. Jim Brown. Elon Musk is reportedly proceeding with the deal to buy Twitter. What are your thoughts? I'm going to be honest, I don't love it. There was a time that I actually, believe it or not, there was a time that I was an Elon Musk fan. I love technology and I love science, and I loved what was happening with Tesla, and I loved particularly more than Tesla what he was doing with SpaceX, because I believe that the future of humanity is space. To be perfectly honest with you, we're never going to succeed just being a one planet species. It's just never going to work long term. If humanity wants to be around hundreds of thousands of years from now, which I know sounds super weird of a thing to think about, but if you want to, you're probably going to have to get off world eventually, right? Eventually. Doesn't mean you got to move to Mars, by the way. There's things like O'Neill cylinders that you can build space habitats. That's probably the way it will go. Probably. That's one thing people don't realize. They always think expanding beyond Earth as meaning you go and settle Mars. Probably not, to be honest. Probably long term. Right now, settling Mars might be easier because it's a rock that you can land on. But long term, space habitat. That just makes way more sense. You have full control of it. You have full control of its environment, unlike something like Mars, right? Where you have to literally, you're in an atmosphere that's not conducive to life. Whereas if you build a giant O'Neill cylinder, you literally control the habitat within it. Long term, I think that's where humanity's future lies, but that is going to take a long time to get the technology to get there. But things like SpaceX are the building blocks we're eventually going to need to get off planet. And so I was a fan, right? As a fan, I think we should be way investing in space. But I'm going to be real with you. I think over the years, Elon has shown himself to be a not very good person. And, not everything is about morality. I'm not a morality preacher, to be honest with you. I don't consider myself a beacon of morality myself. Some people are super invested in morality. I'm just kind of like, whatever about it. I'm just living my life. And I think that's the way most people are. But Elon seems like a not particularly good person. And I don't know if Elon is the sort of person that I want particularly. Outside of that, whatever. I mean, running a business, I think bad people probably can run businesses. I don't think you necessarily have to be a super moral person to be a businessman, but to run a social media platform that has enormous influence and that sort of thing, I don't know if that's the sort of control we want to be giving to billionaire oligarchs, right? That I'm not so sure about. So, little worried about it, to be honest with you, but we'll have to see. Avi. Witcher series sold through 65 plus million. Does it number contain free copies as well? No. Which CD Projekt gave away via GOG back in the day? Nope. From what I understand, no company does that. Anytime you get a Sony number, they'll include For example, they will include in the Sony number bundled with their hardware, but they don't include any PlayStation Plus sales. From what I understand, no publisher or major developer does that. If you do and you get caught, you're pretty effed. So no, that number will not include free giveaways via GOG, I do not believe. And if they do, and CD Projekt Red was ever caught for that, they would get nuclearly raked through the coals, because it's just status quo. You don't do that. You don't do that. And we know for a fact, because Sony openly says it, they don't include PlayStation Plus games with their game sales and things like that. Things like player numbers are different, right? Total players, that can include anything, right? Anytime you see a company say this many people played the game, that doesn't mean that many people bought it. But whenever you're actually reporting sales, which is what CD Projekt was doing with Witcher, you're selling the game. You should not be including freebies. So I do not believe it does. Ken B. Thoughts on Sony producing 2 million PSVRs? We talked about this. Seems like a lot if it goes for 500. No, I actually completely agree. This one report made me think it's not $500, which surprises me, but I'm going to be real with you and explain it. I do not think it's $500 anymore. I really think it's going to be 400. Will they price it less, or is demand really more than PSVR 1? No, demand is not really more than PSVR 1. I'm going to be real with you. If Sony thinks it is like that much more at $500, I think they might be in for a rude awakening. If Sony's really going to launch PSVR 2 at $500 and expect 2 million by March 2023, to be clear, it took 14 months for PSVR 1 to do that. So they're essentially expecting either month 1 or 2 months or something, right? Because if this comes out in February, that's only 2 months. They're expecting PSVR 2 to do in 2 months on a smaller install base what PSVR 1 did in 14 months. I have no idea how you do any sort of economic analysis and think that's how it's going to go if you're launching at $500. Maybe they think scalpers will be that desperate. I do not. So my hunch to be this freaking optimistic, I think it is 400. And that's going to sound super spicy because people just keep going up and up. I'm seeing crazy stuff like $600 or $700. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be that price. It will not be above 500. $499 is the max price this launches at. I'm telling you that right now. So, but why I think it could be less, not only is that shipment number an insane goal, to be perfectly real with you. Also, if you look at Oculus Quest 2, one thing I see people discuss a lot is they're like, well, Oculus Quest 2 is, look at that. The most expensive one on that is friggin', what is it now? 500 or something like that. And, PSVR 2 has even better technology in some ways. While that is partially true, one thing you need to keep in mind, a huge part of Oculus's cost has nothing to do with the lenses, the plastic shell. Most of the price of Oculus is the fact it has chips built into it and it has to run it natively, and it also has to have onboard storage. So you're including either 128 gigs or 256 gigs of storage in this thing, and you also have to have onboard processing. PSVR 2 has 0 onboard processing. I'm sure there's a tiny, tiny amount, but the vast amount of it is being done by the PlayStation 5 itself. You're not putting any sort of really high-end chip inside of this thing. And also, there's no onboard storage because that's all your PlayStation 5. So that is going to bring the price down, and there are Oculus Quest 2s that sell at $400. So I really don't think this is 500 anymore. And if it is, I think Sony is maybe misreading the market, which I'd be surprised if they would after how PSVR 1 went. PSVR 1 was not a slam dunk success for them in any way. So I'd be surprised if you go from what happened with PSVR 1 into PSVR 2, launching it more expensive, and then also being like, not only is it $500, we just came off PSVR 1, which was an extremely slow burn for us, but it's also going to sell more in 2 months than PSVR 1 sold in 14 months. Bro, that is some interesting numbers that Jim Ryan and company are running over there, if that's what they believe. That's what I will say. So I don't think it is. I think it might be 400 now, which I was not predicting before. But I also didn't think they were planning to ship 2 million of them by March. You know what I mean? Didn't expect that either. So once I saw that number, I was like, bro, I don't see how that thing's $500. And if it is, whoo, Very optimistic. Maybe they're right and I'm wrong, but that is optimistic. Michael Yu. No question, just a comment. I don't know if this has been talked about enough, but IGN did a recent article about game delays. Yeah, they've been insane. In 2021, there were 60 game delays. So far this year, 59. This really underscores how badly COVID impacted game development over the last couple of years. I've been saying it on this chat all the time, guys. This generation looks completely different if there wasn't COVID. I'm not going to tell you that, none of these 60 games last year and 59 games would have been delayed this year. Definitely that's not what I'm telling you. But guys, I have been told directly from developers at various studios that it killed their production timelines for big bulks of time. And of course, like anywhere, that's going to super depend. There were some studios, to be honest with you, that adapted very quickly and kind of got up and running fairly quickly, fairly well. There was some of those studios like that. I also know firsthand studios that it crippled their game development for long periods of time. So, yeah, I mean, the COVID impact was brutal, and we're still not out of it yet. I think things really start to improve in 2023. I really think you start to see a lot of releases and things really pick up and it start to feel like the generation again. But, the last 2 years were just annihilated by it. How long have we been going? I'm going to bounce in like 15 minutes. I'm going to go for like 15 minutes and then I got to go. Randy Norman, guess the months that Redfall, Starfield, Forza Motorsport, and Minecraft Legends will release. Well, like I said earlier, release dates are hard to say. I think Redfall's the earliest. I think that's early next year. I'm going to guess Redfall's February or March. I think Starfield, is coming out probably next summer. I know people are going to say, how is that possible? Whenever they announced the delay to Starfield and everything, all that they said was that it would be out by E3 next year. That's June, right? So I'm suspecting that Starfield is not early, I don't think. I think that's May or June. I don't think it'll be after June because they promised it within 12 months, but if it comes out June next year, that's 12 months. So I'm guessing Starfield's May or June. I'm guessing Redfall is early, I think, of them. They've shown the most of Redfall. They showed it again recently. That seems very far along. And it was supposed to come out this year, earlier than Starfield. Forza is probably also fairly early in the year. I could see that being an April game. So this is a total guess, guys. My guess would be Redfall, February or March. Forza, April. Starfield, May or June. Minecraft Legends, no idea. I'm going to be real. I got no clue. No clue. Heavy, though. You guys hear that? All that first party, and that's within the first half of the year. Next year's going to be a really good year for Xbox. As we all know, this year was not. Just being real, just being honest. I love Xbox. Not a good year for Xbox this year. Next year, though, is going to be really heavy for them. They're going to have a great year next year. Partially because this year was so bad, right? So much got pushed into next year. I think we just had a super chat coming in towards the end. 2 super chats. Matt Duffy, I didn't see this. Benji, can we talk about the Disco Elysium devs? Let me hit these 2 things really quick, and then I'm going to get to that. Leonard Herrera, 100% agree with you on Elon Musk, and then we have an alternate opinion here. Abuyan Shibuya. Oh, look, an expert on Elon's character. Here's the difference between me and what Abuyan's going to do right here. Twitter wants to sell, Elon to buy, end of story. None of your business. You're not a shareholder, are you? That's what I thought. Abuyan, have you noticed how I haven't been rude to anyone that likes Elon? You're being rude here, Abuyan. That's the difference, okay? If you love Elon, that's fine. I literally don't care. Why do you care if I don't particularly like his character? Listen, live your life however you're going to live it. I don't judge people. If you like Elon Musk, go for it. You could be the biggest Elon fanboy in the world, and I would always say, that's fine. If you like Elon, you like Elon. I personally was a fan, not so much anymore. And that's life, bro. Not everyone's going to agree with you on everything. Matt Duffy. Benji, can we talk about the Disco Elysium devs? I have no idea about this, Matt, with a sad face. I apologize if something really bad happened to them. I am sorry. I don't know. I missed this. Does someone know the context of what Matt Duffy's talking about? Can you let me know? Because I do not. I got no idea. I hope it's not something bad. Because I've heard Disco Elysium's amazing, so I'm not sure. Highlander with a 5, and I'm going to come back to that, Matt, if someone provides context, or if you can. You could say something in the chat, Matt, and let me know. Highlander 001, time for Halloween. Time for Halloween is here. What are you and your daughter doing for Halloween and your favorite candy to get trick-or-treating? So I'm sure we're going to do some sort of, trick-or-treating, of course. She's getting to that age. She loves this sort of stuff. I don't know what I'm going to dress up as. I don't know what she's going to dress up as. She is obsessed with Disney princesses. Like every year, she was Raya one year. She was Belle from Beauty and the Beast one year. She was Anna from Frozen one year. Like she is the stereotypical little girl that loves Disney princesses. So I'm sure it's going to be some sort of Disney princess for her. Whatever one she wants, but I'm sure. I got no idea. Favorite candy? I would say my 3 favorite candies. I don't eat a ton of sugar. I try to avoid it, but I'm human. I'm going to eat some sometimes. I would say that my favorite ones are going to be Snickers, Reese's, and Kit Kat. Those are my 3 favorite candies. Okay, and here's what Matt Duffy said. They got pushed out of their company, and lost the rights to their IP. And Anthony Johnson says multiple lead devs were basically kicked from the Disco Elysium studio. Conflicting stories. Why? Wow. Okay, so I had completely missed this. It's going to be interesting. I don't know. Wow. That sounds like it could be a super... I don't want to theorize too much on why that would be happening, because who knows, right? I could see why there would be conflicting stories on why. Sounds like some sort of interpersonal studio drama. I will say that if it's not for a very good reason, as in like something really bad was happening there, which I got no idea, guys. I'm not theorizing here. I'm just saying why. The only way I think this would be okay is if something like real bad was happening in the studio, something crazy, right? Sexual harassment, something like that. I'm not saying this would happen, guys, to be clear. I'm just saying, other than that, if it's not something crazy, this seems not good. This seems not good. I was not aware about that. So they were basically forced out. Does not sound good. Does not sound good at all. So I hope that some clarity gets reported on that, because that does seem super strange. Sorry to hear about that. Hopefully we get some clarity on it soon. All right, like 1 or 2 more questions and I gotta go. 1 or 2 more and I gotta go. Thanks for a great turnout. Let me see. Let me pick 1 or 2 more. Great one here from Logan Hardy. Benji, are you still on for Ragnarok? Not breaking the record, and does Metacritic play a big part in it? I don't think I ever said that I don't think Ragnarok will. I think I've said that it might. It's going to be close. The Last of Us is just such a hard record to beat, though. 4 million in 3 days is freaking high. I will say tracking on Ragnarok looks extraordinary. The big question for Ragnarok is going to be how much does PlayStation 4 owners wanting to wait to upgrade to PS5 affect it? What I've always said, I think, or at least I know I've said this at least once, and I apologize if I'm contradicting myself from a time before that, but if PlayStation 5 had, let's say, a freaking 70 million install base, I would be feeling pretty good about Ragnarok beating Last of Us. I'm going to be honest. I know that 4 million in 3 days is a pretty crazy high bar to beat. But man, God of War, the last one, did over 3 million, and that was coming off of, people forget, God of War in a very weak place as a franchise, and whereas this is coming off of strength. So the big question to me about Ragnarok's launch, no matter what, it's huge. The question to me is how many of those people that are on PS4 are still going to wait, or how many of them aren't? How many of them are going to be like, listen, I still don't have a PS5, but I friggin' want this game, so I'm buying it on PS4. I think that is literally what it comes down to, is those people. Those people are going to make or break the 4 million number. If there's enough of them still on PS4 that don't care they don't have a PS5 yet, they need to play Ragnarok and are buying it there, I think it can do it. But if a chunk of them, like we kind of saw with Horizon Forbidden West, in my opinion, still want to wait on that PS5 version for when they have one, it could hold it back from the 4 mil. That's going to be the make or break thing for Ragnarok. Miles, yeah, I got busy, so I didn't hear your response. Do you think PlayStation have enough studios and second-party partnerships to release 2 exclusives per year? Absolutely. So there's no need to be worried. Yeah, they're going to get 2 per year at least. This year alone, they had Horizon, Gran Turismo, Last of Us Part 1, and Ragnarok. They had 4 this year. So 2, I don't think they'll ever have an issue hitting 2. The question is, could they hit 4 every year like they did this year? That I'm not so sure about. But 2, yeah, Sony will have 2 exclusives per year for sure. T800, hope you're doing well. I am doing great. I hope you're doing well, T800. 1 or 2 more and I gotta go. Samir saying hi from India. Hello to you, Samir, in India. I hope you're all doing amazing. Pong Soul, who's always super supportive and kind. Awesome to see / hear you, brother. Great to see you, Pong Soul. Ken B is saying that cold wind and rain there. Hope it's nice here. It is nice. It is nice. I'm lucky. The weather's really beautiful here right now. Samuel Tolbear, good friend of mine, so I got to hit Samuel's question. Great to see you, my buddy. Hit up Samuel on Windows Central, on Android Central. I don't know if Samuel still does stuff on Android Central. I'm pretty sure he does. Great journalist, great guy in the industry. Check him out. Follow him on Twitter. Benji, hope you're doing well, bro. Doing great, my friend. Thoughts on the Dead Space remake gameplay trailer? And do you have any early expectations for how well the game will perform? I thought it looked really good. What I will say, Samuel, okay, it definitely truly looks like a remake in the sense of it's very similar to the original Dead Space, right? Visually, obviously, it's a giant upgrade, but it is very, very similar. I'm sure there's going to be some differences, but it's more closer to like, it feels like at least, and I could be wrong once I actually play this, but it feels closer, I would say, to something like The Last of Us Part 1 than it does to, and again, not exactly, but it feels closer to that than it does something like, I would say, you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is like radically different. Still following the same core storyline in a lot of ways, but, you know, they're really experimenting and doing new things with it. This is closer, not exact, but closer to a one-to-one remake. So it depends on how people feel about that. Dead Space 1 is so old now that I think it's actually okay that it's pretty much a one-to-one remake, because that is an old game, right? That was an Xbox 360 and PS3 game, and not like late Gen 1. That's an old game. So I think it's been plenty long enough. It deserves the remake. I think it's going to do pretty well, to be real with you. I think there's a chance, and we'll have to see. I don't know this. There might be a chance. The interesting race is going to be between this and Callisto Protocol. I think Dead Space might be bigger just because of the brand name. Even though it's a remake, whereas the other one's a brand new title, I don't know. Though Callisto's cross-gen and Dead Space is current-gen only, right? So that is a factor. That's the interesting race to me, Samuel. I do think it will do well. It's a horror game, so we need to keep in mind, probably don't expect astronomical sales. Only a handful of horror games hit huge, Resident Evil in particular. But outside of Resident Evil, you know, most of these horror games aren't doing ginormous sales. You know, a couple million's good for a horror game. So that's what I would say. And I would also say the interesting thing to me is really that Callisto Protocol versus Dead Space race. That's going to be interesting to watch. Okay. I gotta like do 1 or 2 more or I'm never gonna stop myself. 2 more. I'm putting a hard limit. 2 more. I will not go past that, and then I gotta go. I agree with this. Michael Strathmore sounds like a load of years to build the world for all the games, with games 2 and 3 being beefy DLC turned full price titles. I would not agree with the second part, but I agree with the first part. So, guys, a 3-year development cycle is not short. That's a long time. Like, people are forgetting that. Like, up until recently, 3 years was considered plenty of time to make a game. This whole thing where it's 5 or 6 years to make games, that is a recent anomaly. That is not like the standard practice in our industry. And I know that that is the truth nowadays, right? Nowadays, it often takes 5 to 6 years to make a game. That was not true for most of time in video games, and part of it's games being more complex. I also think, though, that the industry needs to desperately do anything it can to reduce development cycles. I talked about this on Twitter very, very briefly. The biggest danger to the future of AAA, I'm telling you right now, if you could pick, what's the biggest future? Is it the price of games? Is it, the strategy of release of games? I'm telling you right now, the biggest risk for the future of AAA is how long it takes to make a game. I've talked about this several times on here. Guys, taking 6 years to make a game, who freaking knows if it's successful or not? And then, oops, it bombed. 6 more years to get another game out the door. That is not sustainable. It will not work. Okay, it's just math. It's just not going to work. Is it going to work occasionally? Could a studio have a huge bomb and, oh my God, we survive it and 5 years later we get out another game that's successful? Sure. You're also going to see a ton of companies have huge financial woes if that is the release strategy. And it's not a coincidence you're seeing so many publishers willing to sell right now. And part of that is how freaking long it takes to make games, because that makes all of game development more risky inherently. Inherently, the longer it takes to make a game, the higher the risk. It's literally a curvature chart. You can literally put years to make game, risk to development, and they just go hand in hand, because that means the longer it takes, if you have a mess up, to get a second chance, and that costs money. So, Michael, me sounding frustrated here, it's not your comment, it's like the overall discussion about this. The industry has to find a way to bring game development cycle times down. I don't know how that is. I'm not telling you it's easy. I'm not telling you I'm the expert with the answers, because I'm not. I don't make games. But the core problem that the industry has to figure out, we can't take 5 to 6 years to constantly release these games. They got to get down. They've got to get that window down. So honestly, I am all for CD Projekt being like, we want to try and get these out every 3 years, because that's what has to happen eventually, or we're going to see catastrophes in this industry. And we already have kind of seen some almost cases, and not some just almost cases, all of a sudden publishers being like, we want to sell our company. Why do you think Activision really wanted to sell? Do you think it was just because, Bobby Kotick? No. It was also because they had huge issues with Vanguard. They were in a huge desperate situation. Vanguard bombs. You're so reliant on one game. Who knows what's going to happen with the development of these other games? They're taking too long to make. Overwatch is taking way too long for us to make Overwatch 2. We're in a problem there. All of these Blizzard games, Diablo 4, are taking too long to make. That's why this stuff is happening. It just snowballs. If you could get that window down, let's say to 3 years, suddenly, there's still risk. But if you mess up, it's, dang it, we messed up. We got 3 years, though, turn around to get another project out the door. Or if you're a multi-team studio, dang it, we messed up. It's going to take this team 3 years to get a game out the door. But you know what? The other team at the studio has a game dropping in 2 years. So we've got another chance here coming up to get some money back. This idea that studios can just take 5 to 6 years between games and there's nothing in between, it ain't going to work. It's just not going to work, especially as games continue to cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm being real. I am very much in favor of this. I totally agree with the first part of your question here, where you're saying that you can do a ton of the work for 2 and 3 off the bat with 1, right? 2 and 3 are going to be able to reuse a lot of animations from the first game. They're going to probably be able to reuse some assets directly, character models and things from the first game. That will make development of 2 and 3 easier, because it's all going to be done on Unreal Engine. So hopefully you can get, those next 2 games out in that 3-year apiece window. But Yeah, I totally agree. And we can't be having games constantly take 5 to 6 years. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, I said 2 questions, so one more and I got to go. One more and I got to go. I'm going to finish. There's still a lot of good questions, but I'm going to finish here with Hammersley Ford because it's a sales number, and then we're going to bounce. I apologize to any questions that I missed today, and then we're going to bounce. Hammersley Ford, Steam Deck apparently shipped 1 million units. Yeah, pretty darn good to see. You know, we had some indications that this was selling pretty darn well. Obviously, it's not selling at the rate of like, you know, a flagship Xbox or a flagship PlayStation. But for a portable PC that's been super supply constrained, you know, as we all know, super long back orders and stuff to get your actual Steam Deck, I'd say 1 million in this time frame, pretty solid to see. You know, I think that's just going to continue to go up. Steam Deck has become very, very popular. I don't know that we ever see Steam Deck becoming one of these things that's going to sell, you know, 50 million per generation of Steam Deck, like a mainline console or something. But if they can get to a place where each model of the Steam Deck they release is selling millions of units, and, you know, some people aren't going to instantly upgrade to whatever the next Steam Deck is. They're going to still be playing on their original Steam Deck. If they can get to the place where this thing just has millions and millions and millions and millions of units installed out there, it's going to become a pretty nice, important thing for both Valve and the PC, you know, development community. Because if you have millions of these things out there, it opens up another window of people to either play into the ecosystem of Steam and everything, and B, be even more invested if they're already a PC gamer by having one they can take with them on the go. Just means you're even more invested in the overall ecosystem and continuing to buy games and all of that sort of thing. So good to see. All right, everybody, I'm going to call it there. Thanks for a great chat. Super juicy and good topics to talk about today. I loved doing this chat just like I love doing every chat. Let me make sure I didn't miss any super chats. I did not. So we are good to go. All right, everybody. I had a blast. Thanks to everyone that showed up. I know it was late notice, so I appreciate it. Stay safe. Play some games. I will either see you on Twitter here really soon if you follow me on Twitter, or I will see you here on YouTube next week if you only follow me here on YouTube. We do one of these chats per week, and I'll see you all soon. Love you guys. Thanks for all of your support and all of the incredible stuff that you guys do for me every single day, and I will see you soon.